Are we ready? Then hold that mortal's thread of life good and tight. Welcome to Teacup for One. My name is Matt and I have 2 degrees, and welcome back to another video where I talk about one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Disney animated films of all time, Hercules. Who put the glad in Gladiator? It was Hercules. We all know it was Hercules. So, clearly, this is not my first time talking about Hercules on the channel. I did a video all about why I think there's a case to be made for Meg being the best Disney character in the studio's history. I also did a deep dive into the Greek mythology surrounding the Muses, and I have to say that at the time of recording this video, that is currently my most viewed video on the channel, and that makes me really happy for 2 reasons. The first being that it means there are at least 3,000 people out there who love Hercules as much as I do, but most importantly, it means that this is no longer the most viewed video on my channel. So today, I wanted to do another deep dive into a set of characters from Disney's Hercules that don't have that much screen time, but again, have a huge impact on the story. The Fates. Now, I would wager that the Fates are probably in the film for less than 4 minutes, but once again, this is showing us why Disney's Hercules is one of the best animated Disney films of all time, because even though they have such little screen time, there is so much history and depth woven into their characters. Pun intended. Now, of course, this is Disney, so just like we saw with the Muses, the film's depiction of the Fates is wildly inaccurate to actual Greek mythology, while at the same time being wildly accurate to Greek mythology. Let me explain. The Fates in Disney's Hercules are actually a combination of 2 sets of powerful trios from Greek mythology. So the first and most obvious set would be the Fates, or if you want to hear me butcher the Greek pronunciation, which, let's be honest, that's going to be a running theme throughout this video, the Moirai. Now, according to my labor-intensive Wikipedia research, Moirai is rooted in the ancient Greek words that mean portion, or allocation, or fraction. And solely based on Disney's Fates, you might not think that those words are relevant to what they do at all, because the Fates in the film are really only concerned with the ending of human life. And that is a part of what they do, but it's really only one part of the assembly line. I mean, let's be honest, it's probably like the most fun part, but still, only one part. The whole purpose of the Fates was to allocate life and destiny to every single living person. And once they set an individual's life in motion, it could not be tampered with, or else there would be consequences. Dire consequences. Basically, just think of them like the timekeepers from Loki. They dictate all of human existence, and even the gods don't understand how or why they do what they do. There are 3 Fates: Clotho, Lachesus, and Atropos. Clotho, whose name translates to spinner, had the first job in the process: spinning the thread of life. So, because Clotho was the one who was creating the thread of life, she was the fate that was associated with birth and the determination of everything that went into the creation of any given person. And even though the Fates have such little screen time in the film, Disney still manages to show us Clotho at work. When the Fates are waiting for Hades at the start of the film, she is the one seen holding the supply of the thread of life. Next was Lachesus, whose name means the appointer, or the measurer, or the ruler, but not like the ruler, but more like the ruler, or, the dispenser of lots. Basically, Lachesus means the person who decides how long something is, which is appropriate because Lachesus was the one who measured the thread of life, which of course would determine how long any given person would have to live on Earth. Now, appropriately enough, Lachesus is the fate that we see in Disney's Hercules, holding the mortal's thread of life good and tight, so that it could be cut by the third and most terrifying fate, Atropos. Atropos means unalterable or inflexible, because, of course, Atropos is the one playing the role of death in this assembly line. So think of it as though Clotho equals birth, Lachesus equals life, and Atropos equals death, or the unalterable fate. And so because their whole deal is about mapping out and monitoring the trajectory of every human life, I suspect that's where the whole idea of them being able to see into the future comes into play. It's not so much that we're supposed to assume that they're clairvoyants or fortune tellers, as much as they're like weather men, weather people, weather fates. Yeah, so like they're not gazing into the future, they're just reading what's in front of them. And then maybe sometimes they'll choose to share that information. Now, when it comes to the fates, there's one thing that I wasn't able to find a clear answer on, and that is whether or not they're the ones controlling all of the choices that people make during their lives, or if they just concern themselves with putting people on Earth, giving them a set amount of time and tools to play with, and then deciding when playtime was over. And it's entirely possible that I just didn't do enough research to find the concrete answer, but I really think that this is the eternal question when it comes to the fates. Is our fate in their hands or ours? Do we actually have free will? Or are the fates just playing Dungeons and Dragons and we're their made-up players? It's honestly a question that stresses me out way too much, so we're going to move on. Because like I said, the fates in Disney's Hercules are actually inspired by two trios from Greek mythology. Because here's the thing. The physical appearance of the fates has been pretty fluid over the past few centuries. You know, traditionally, the fates are depicted as being older and witch-like, but they've also been depicted as being beautiful and ageless. And my personal favorite interpretation, and I think this might be a more recent artistic interpretation, but regardless, my personal favorite is when we see Clotho as being a young woman, Lachesus as being an adult middle-aged woman, and Atropos being an older, almost scarier witch-like woman. Because then you have the three fates physically representing the three stages of life, and I just think that is so cool. But all of this is to say that no matter how differently the fates have been portrayed over the years, they always have both of their eyes. One of the most memorable things about the fates in Disney's Hercules was the fact that the three of them shared one single eye between them. And this was actually borrowed from a trio of sea monsters, or maybe they were sea goddesses, maybe they were mermaid swans. Every resource translates ancient Greek slightly differently. Doesn't matter. They were a trio called the Graeae, or the Grey Sisters. The Grey Sisters were a trio of sea witches that were old and grey. Like, literally, those were their two defining features. They were eternally old, and they had grey hair. And they also shared a single eye and a single tooth between the three of them. Not too hygienic, but they were sisters, so according to the laws of cooties, they get a pass. Just like the fates in Disney's Hercules, the Grey Sisters would trade the eye and the tooth between the three of them, and then once they put the eye in the socket of choice, it enabled them to see. But as far as I can tell, I think that's where the similarities ended. So, you know, the eye was just used for seeing, and the tooth was used for toothing. And the eye really wasn't a tool or a device that allowed anyone to see into the future. That, so far as I can tell, was entirely an invention of Disney's. So they were combining the cool visual of the Grey Sisters and their shared eye with the fact that the fates could kind of see into the future. But this is what is so bleepin' brilliant about how Disney incorporates the idea of the fates having a shared eye. Because that single artistic choice just encompasses so many iconic tropes of Greek mythology and Greek theater all in one short scene. So of course there's what we've already discussed. We have the fates as a trio of characters that can dictate when a person dies. The fates in the film share one eye between the three of them. That's from the Grey Sisters, check, check. But on top of that, the choice to animate Atropos as only having a single eye socket gives us the film's first official Cyclops, which of course is one of the most iconic characters from Greek mythology, popularized by the Odyssey. And on top of that, they firmly establish that the fates are able to see into the future. And Because 2 of the 3 fates are blind at any given time, they are indirectly giving us the classic Greek trope of the blind prophet. Okay, this is one of those things that really merits its own video, so we're just going to skim the surface really quickly right here. But there is a Greek prophet, I think his name is Tiresias, who has cameos in a slew of epic poems and Greek plays. So think things like the Odyssey, Oedipus Rex, Antigone, and the role of the blind prophet is pretty self-explanatory. It's a character who is blind and can see into the future. And because Greek drama works the way it does, the blind prophet will usually predict the downfall of whoever asked them for a reading. Then, that person, in trying to counteract the prophecy, will go out and do a bunch of stupid things. But then, said stupid things will end up leading to the downfall that the blind prophet predicted in the first place. So basically, exactly what happens with Hades. Now, hear me out. The fates predict that if Hercules fights, Hades will fail. After hearing that, Hades makes a series of decisions that pretty much lead Hercules down a path that lead to him becoming the hero that could ultimately defeat Hades. Now, if Hades had just left Hercules alone, then Hercules would have grown up, sheltered on Mount Olympus. He never would have lived life as a human. He never would have known suffering. He never would have learned the value of true love and hard work. And honestly, he would have been just as useless in the battle against the Titans as the rest of the gods on Mount Olympus were. So all of that is to say that even though Disney's Hercules is wildly inaccurate in terms of plot, the film does a beautiful job of embracing the characters, tropes, and themes found in ancient Greek drama and mythology. And when it comes to the fates specifically, it really all boils down to that one question that Wikipedia didn't answer for me. Are we in charge of our own fate? Or are our fates predetermined? For example, are you going to watch another 2 to 3 Teacup for One videos immediately following this one because you want to? Or because it's your fate? And with that, friends, we conclude yet another episode of Teacup for One. Now, let me know in the comment section down below, who is your favorite character in Disney's Hercules? Or, if you want to get really philosophical, let me know where you stand on this whole conversation about fate. Do you think we are in charge of our own destinies? Or are they predetermined by a bunch of Greek goddesses at Stitch and Bitch? And if you want to be the first to know when I release more videos talking about Disney, Shakespeare, Funko Pops, sometimes cats, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed already. If you haven't subscribed already, it is so easy. All you have to do is click on my face. Thanks for joining me today, everyone. My name is Matt, and I have 2 degrees, and that's the Teacup for One. Go away.